These are your second set of notes for this week. These are notes number 24. And this is section 13-2 in the book. This is, again, second volume. So it's the book that goes up to the higher pages, page 848. This is the warm-up that we should have gone over already, just reviewing again the difference between theoretical and experimental probability. And our essential question is, how do I make and use frequency tables and probability distributions? So those are the two main things we're going to learn about today. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so go ahead and copy this first. We've got two vocabulary words. We've got a frequency table. Pause it if you need to. I know sometimes it's easier to just pause, copy, and then listen. So a frequency table is a data display, like a chart, that shows how often an item appears in a category. So there could be a bunch of different kinds of categories, and then you have numbers to show how many times each thing occurs. That's the frequency. So it's just a table to organize it, a data display. Relative frequency is a calculation. Relative frequency is the ratio, so that's a fraction, of the frequency of the category to the total frequency. So in order to calculate relative frequency, you need to add up all the different numbers and get the total frequency. And then you'll have a ratio of the top number would be the frequency of just that one category over the total frequency. Again, pause it whenever you guys need to. Here is our first example. I'm going to go ahead and move this just a bit. There. And this is actually an example that's in the book, but I want it in your notes. So we're going to copy this down. So pause if you need to. This is an example of different types of music. So it says, what is the relative frequency of preference for each type of music? So imagine if some people were asked which type of music they prefer. And then we have, these are the different categories, the type of music, and this is the frequency. So how often each person, or no, how many people would say they prefer each type. So for rock, there's 10, hip hop 7, country 8, classical 5, alternative 6, other 4. So what we need to know in order to calculate relative frequency, we need to know the total. So I like to add that to the bottom of our tables. If it's given to you like this, I usually will find total and I write it down, because when we find relative frequency, we have to divide by the total. Let me keep that there. Okay, so all you have to do is add up all of the values, either mentally or just use a calculator. So I'll just show you, I'll use a calculator. I'm going to add up 10 plus 7 plus 8 plus 5 plus 6 plus 4, and I get 40. So the total number of people asked would have been 40. Okay, so now I just have to find, I have to make simplified fractions. I have to find the relative frequency for classical music, hip hop, and country. So again, relative frequency, if we look up here, a data display, oh, whoops, it's this one, a ratio of the frequency of the category to the total frequency. So again, that's why I found total frequency, so that way I know what to divide by. So classical, I have to have the top number. How many people prefer classical? So I'm going to just circle that one just so you guys can see where the number's coming from. There's 5 out of the total, which is 40. If you can reduce that fraction, you have to, because it says simplified fraction. That's how it's going to be on Math Excel. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify my fraction and divide the top and bottom by the greatest common factor, which is 5. Divide top and bottom by 5. So 1/8. And that's my answer for relative frequency. All right, next one is hip hop. So I'm going to make it a fraction, the frequency of people who prefer hip hop over the total frequency. So hip hop is right here. It is 7. So I would have 7 out of the total, which is still 40. I can't reduce that, so that is actually the answer. Those are easier when you don't have to reduce it. All right, and then the next one is country. So you can think about, where do you fit here? What's your favorite kind of music? Or maybe it's not listed. You might be in the other category. So country, I put on the top the number of people who prefer country, which is 8, out of the total frequency, which is 40. And of course, I can reduce that. Always reduce your fractions. It'll count it wrong in MathXL if you don't reduce. So divide the top and bottom by 8, and I get 1/5. Okay, so that's how you find relative frequency. Just make sure you reduce your fractions. At some point, you might be asked to give it as a decimal, maybe in the next unit or so. So just remember, you can always divide the top number divided by the bottom to get a decimal. But for this section, reduced fractions are perfectly fine. All right, so now we're going to switch over to the book. Go ahead and write this in your notes, though. Page 840. You can use relative frequency to approximate the probability of events. And again, pause if you didn't quite get everything. Make sure you get everything and listen to the explanation. And I'll go to page 850. Remember, it's volume 2. And if you don't have a book, you can just write this down on your notes. So again, you can use relative frequency to approximate the probabilities of events. All right, so I'm going to just put my book on top right here. Again, this is on page 850. And it actually says that at the top. So we're actually going to go down to this one, this favorite snacks one. This is how it'll be in the homework in MathXL. So it says 23 preschoolers were asked what their favorite snacks are. The results are shown in the bar graph at the right. So I don't think it tells you the total in MathXL. So just remember, you can add up all of these totals. Each one represents a preschooler. So bananas, there are 8 of them. It's just a different way to organize it. So there's 8 plus, this is between 4 and 6, so that would be 5. The next one is 4, and the next one is popcorn, so 6. And if you add that up, that's 10, and then 15. 15 plus 8, that is 23. So if it doesn't tell you the total, then you can add up every category, add up all the different categories, frequencies, and then you get the total. Again, you need to have the total to get relative frequency. So it says, for this first question, what is the probability that a preschooler chosen at random chose popcorn as his or her favorite snack? So we're finding probability of popcorn. I would have to put the relative frequency, which is just the number that chose popcorn out of the total. So for popcorn, it's 6 out of the total 23. If you can reduce it, you would. It doesn't say I need to make it a decimal or a percent, so 6 out of 23 would be fine. But just to remind you guys, probability can be expressed as a decimal, and it would be 0.26, which is closer to 0, so it's less likely to happen. And it could also be a percentage. Move the decimal place 2 over to get 26%. So just a reminder, but that would be fine, 6 over 23. 6 out of 23 preschoolers prefer popcorn. So the probability of choosing one at random would be 6 out of 23. All right, and then the second question that we want to go over, we'll try to hold that there, is number 4. What is the probability that a preschooler chosen at random did not choose bananas as his or her favorite snack? So when it says did not, you can always take the total and subtract the one that it's saying. Did not choose bananas. Bananas had 8. So I could just subtract 8 from 23 and I get 15. So you could add up popcorn 6 plus celery and cheese. Celery and cheese, that's kind of weird. But anyways, 6 plus 4 plus 5, and that is 15. Either way, you can add up the remaining categories, or you could subtract the one that's excluded from the total. You get 15 either way. So anyways, the probability of not bananas would be, there's 15 that chose not bananas out of the 23 total. Reduce it if you can, but you can't, so that's the answer. Okay, so that's how you use relative frequency tables to calculate probability. Really, it's pretty much just the relative frequency of each category that it's telling you. So the frequency number over the total. Okay, so I'm going to move it. Pause it if you need this. Okay, that was page 850. And now we are going to continue on another page. Okay, so go ahead and write this down. Pause if you need to. I'm not going to wait because if you need to pause it, just pause it and then copy it down. Okay, so a probability distribution. This is the last thing we're going to go over today. Probability distribution shows the probability of each possible outcome, kind of like what we just did, but you would do it for every outcome. And it can be shown in a frequency table. So we're going to make a table to organize this. So we have this example, and this is very similar to what you'll have on your Math Excel assignment. So when it says probability distribution or find probability in a table, think of this example. So I'm going to use different colors to point out the information. And again, go ahead and pause it if you haven't yet and you need to write it down, because I'm going to start explaining. So on a math test, there were 10 scores between 90 and 100. There were, it doesn't say that, but there were 12 scores between 80 and 89. There were 15 scores between 70 and 79. And finally, let me get a different color, I'll get yellow. Finally, there were 8 scores between 60 and 69. So those are all the different scores. The question now, sometimes it's good to like maybe circle that question or highlight the question. What is the probability distribution for the test scores? So they want us to make a whole table showing all of the probability distribution. Okay, so I was thinking maybe the book had one to show you what it looks like, but it doesn't. So we'll just make one together so you'll see as we go how to make it. So what you need to do is you need to figure out like a title for it. What is this information showing? So read the problem again. On a math test, there were blah, blah, blah scores, all those different scores, all those different scores. What is the probability distribution? Okay, so this is going to be a math scores probability distribution table. So math test scores. We've got the scores from, let me get the different categories, and we want to keep it in order. We know math scores go from maybe highest to lowest, so 90 to 100. And then the next category was 80 to 89. And the next category was 70 to 79. And the last one, 60 to 69. Those are A's, B's, C's, and D's. So those are the math scores. And then the next one, I can actually make a little column for frequency. Frequency. My last one, my last little column will be for probability. Probability. Okay, so I know you guys can probably figure it out, but I'll color code it just to make sure you guys see it. So my green was my 10 scores between 90 and 100. 90 to 100, frequency was 10. Okay, now I'm going to go to 12 scores between 80 to 89. So between 80 to 89, that was 12. That's like 12 students who got B's. That's what that means. And then I've got 15 scores between 70 and 79. 15. And then I've got, this got crooked somehow. Then I've got 8 scores between 60 to 69. So that is an 8. Okay. So that's how you fill out a frequency table, which you may have done in the past. What you probably haven't done, the new thing, is finding probability. So if you can remember back to what we just did in the book, let me just show it. I closed the page. So on page 850, we found probability just for one category. What we're going to do is find probability for each one. So remember how we found the probability of popcorn? It was 6 out of 23. We could have found the probability of bananas, 8 out of 23, trail mix, 5 out of 23, and written them all as fractions. That's what we're going to do in this table. So there's one thing I need to know. In order to make it a fraction, I know my top numbers, I know my frequency. I need to know the bottom number. I need to know the total. So I can re-look at the problem and see if it told me a total, or I can just add them up. So I'm going to just look, see if I missed that. It doesn't really tell me the number of students in this class or whatever. So I'm going to grab my calculator to make sure I don't make a mistake and add these up. 10 plus 12 plus 15 plus 8. 45. So our total amount of students is 45. So that means every time I write my probability, it's going to be out of 20 or out of 45. And so you'll have a very similar problem to this on MathExcel, except it's kind of skipping this frequency part. So I want you to see that what you could do is, remember, always find the total. You could skip making this frequency column, and you could just go straight to, okay, the 90 to 100, you can see in the problem, there's 10. And then as long as you know the total, it's out of 45, you can do that, 10 out of 45. I'm pretty sure on this problem, on the MathExcel, it doesn't have you reduce. So if you do want to reduce, you can. I would divide by 5, and I would get 5 over 9. But I'm pretty sure it doesn't want you to reduce. I don't know why it has you reduce on other problems and then not this one. Well, I'll actually tell you, there is one reason why you might. So I'll go over that in a second. And then for the 80 to 89, we know it's 12. But if you didn't do this frequency table part, you could just see in the problem, there's a 12. 12 out of 45. You can divide by 3. If you divide by 3, it reduces to 4 out of 1. 4 out of 15? Yeah, 15. And that can't reduce anymore. Let me zoom in just a little so you can see that better. Okay, and then for the 70, 79, we have 15 right here. That's why we do it. It makes it easy, but you could have looked in the actual problem and seen, oh, it's 15 out of the total, 45. Divide by 15 to top and bottom because it goes into 45, and that would be 1/3. 1 out of 3. I think I'm right. That should be good. And then 8 for the last one, but you could have just looked in the problem. So see how I circled them? You don't need to do this table when you're doing the MathExcel. You can see the problems right, or the values right there in the problem. So 8 out of 45, which doesn't reduce. So the reason that they may not have you simplify on MathExcel is because if you add up all of the numerators, all of the top numbers, when it's not simplified, it should add up to the total. And that's kind of like a way to check and make sure that it is 100% of the people who took tests. So I'll just show you one more time. If I just add up the top numbers, that would be 10. Then the next top number is 12, and then 15, and then 8. And that does equal 45. So all together, if you add up all the probabilities, it would be 45 out of 45, which is 1, which is like 100%. So that's a way you can kind of check your work and make sure you did it all correctly. But notice if you were to add the numerators once it's reduced, it won't equal 45. You can't add fractions. Well, you can. You'd have to get a common denominator. It's like going backwards again. So anyways, I'm pretty sure in MathExcel, they are okay with you not reducing. I think the denominator might be something like 1,000, so it'd be a bit tricky anyways. So just remember, the main thing is when you have a problem like this, probability, find the total. You always have to know the total. So add them up, get the total. That's one very important thing, get the total, and then you can find the frequency for each one by doing, or sorry, the probability for each one by doing the number, the frequency number over the total, frequency over the total like that. All right, so just don't forget to do your 3 questions on the left in a summary. Remember in your summary, answer the essential question. How do I make and use frequency tables and probability distributions? Go back through your notes and study it and think about it, and pause it if you need to go back and watch this again if you need to understand it better. So after the notes, make sure you do Math Excel number 24.